The following is a presentation of Big Polly's World of Sports Sims. I'm Big Polly, and I approve this message.
Big Polly's World of Sports Sims proudly presents the Grand Slam Wrestling Match of the Week.
Welcome to another edition of the Grand Slam Wrestling Match of the Week. I'm Big Polly coming to you. In the virtual sense of the game, it is year 3, week 34, and I kind of borrowed that from the Universal Baseball Association, that novel. I don't really have like a set date that I do this. It's just a generic week and a generic year. And we're in Atlantic City, New Jersey, virtually, for this Junior Heavyweight Championship match between Dr. Wagner Jr. and Red Bastien. Now, the Junior Heavyweight division was a staple back in the old NWA, which was a series of regional circuits that ran from just after World War II up until about the late 1980s, when the WWF forced the NWA out of business and basically changed into World Championship Wrestling. And the NWA was down to 2 or 3 circuits. Portland was one, maybe a few in Mexico, and the merged Georgia Mid Atlantic NWA, which became World Championship Wrestling. All the other circuits of the NWA either folded or became their own federations in hopes to survive a little longer. And back in the day, in the formation of the NWA, they had a world heavyweight champion who would travel from circuit to circuit, had to be a good wrestler enough to keep a offshoot territory to try to outmuscle the world heavyweight champion and have one of their men called their own. And the promoters would decide in advance, okay, well, Lou Fez is the champion now, but we want Cowboy Dick Hutton to win the title, and it was all prearranged, and it all had a ring of truth and logic to it that you don't see in wrestling anymore. And one of the things they also had was a traveling junior heavyweight champion, and that died out in the NWA about the time the NWA did. Junior heavyweights for my federation, the GSW, Grand Slam Wrestling, I define one of two ways. Either they weigh 225 pounds or less, or they were at one point in their career a junior heavyweight champion. And that's why we have Dr. Wagner Jr. against Red Bastien. Bastien weighed less than 225, and Dr. Wagner Jr. was a Lucha Libre star who was a champion in the lower weight classes. Let's go through the card that played out in Atlantic City, the first 10 bouts, and then we'll get to our main event. Ahmed Johnson won by DQ over Handsome Johnny Barron with Bobby Davis at ringside. He gains 9 points. I've been tinkering around with the ratings a bit, and if you win technically by DQ or count out or on cuts or injury, you get a fourth of your rating shaved off. So Ahmed Johnson's going to go from 35 to roughly 26, give or take a few points. And Johnny Barron's going to go from 17 to 26 also. It'll be a 26 also. And that's my rough estimate of the ratings. And then at the end of the week, I go by ratings class, and that breaks all the tiebreakers. Kerry Von Erich beat Cowboy Bob Orton, managed by Captain Lou Albano by DQ, 11:07 there when Lou Albano interfered. Bobby Davis interfered in the first match. In the first tag match, the Briscoe brothers over Carl Von Schatz and Kurt Von Hess, and they won cleanly, so they get half of their rating of 25 shaved off to 13, and Von Schatz and Von Hess will pick up 13 points and go down to 37, roughly. Sting against Kendo Nagasaki, not the Florida wrestler, but the wrestler who wore a mask in the United Kingdom and was a star there in the 70s and 80s for a great while. Sting won by DQ when Nagasaki refused to break a hold. Speaking of European stars, Otto Wantz, who was once the AWA champion back in the 80s, against Ted Cox, that went to a double countout. And when we have double countouts or draws, the underdog will gain points, but the highest rated of the two do not lose any points. It's just a free shot for Ted Cox to move up. And Ted Cox was a brawler out of the 30s and the 40s, if you were wondering. I think he was based out of New York back in the days before World War II, basically. The Gibson brothers and Black Gordman and Grand Goliath out of Mexico and the West Coast. It was Gordman and Goliath pulling out the win in 28:53, just before the 30-minute time limit expired. Bruno Sammartino and King Kong Angelo Mosca went to a double countout. Ray Stevens beat Rocky Johnson. And in our two title matches prior to this, the interns with Dr. Ken Ramey knocked off JYD, Junkyard Dog, and Tommy Rich. Andre the Giant and Triple H went to a double countout. A couple of WWF stars, Andre very briefly holding the WWF title, and Triple H has held it many times. And that gets us to our main event. It is Red Bastien against Dr. Wagner. Dr. Wagner beat Jay Youngblood to win the junior heavyweight title, and it was Youngblood who ended the reign of El Santo, who held the title over a year, and then Youngblood lost the title in his first defense. This is Dr. Wagner Jr.'s first defense of his newly won junior heavyweight title. We're underway, and I made an error. I made an error in not setting a time limit, so I am going to go back, and you're going to see me reset this match. And this is why I always like to do matches one at a time, because this is what happens sometimes is you forget to set a setting correctly. And here's Dr. Wagner Jr. again, and there is Red Bastien right here, and we will let Vogue control each. Dr. Wagner Jr., of course, is the heel. It's a defend the title match, meaning the heel will pull out all the stops to keep his championship, whereas if you had a babyface be champion, then he would be more of a sportsman and give the heel more of a chance. It's a one fall 60-minute time limit match. The only trading of holds is going to be ropes to arm hold for Bastien. And Bastien is going for the World Junior Heavyweight Championship. Like I said, it's one fall 60 minutes. I'm double checking to make sure I got it. And here we go. Bastien's ready for any pre-match shenanigans, so Dr. Wagner Jr. could not sneak up from behind on him. Neck hold by Bastien, and he gets the first points off of Wagner. And a standing headlock now by Red Bastien onto Dr. Wagner. There is a Dr. Wagner Sr. They just call him Dr. Wagner, and he was a lucha libre great in Mexico. And loses control. It goes to Dr. Wagner Jr. He has a legal chop, and he scores his first points on Bastien. This is a match that probably could easily go the 60-minute time limit. Bastien has to win by pinfall or submission within the 60 minutes to win the title. Body slam by Wagner Jr. Pin hold, first pin attempt of the match, and it results in no pin. Checking for a submission, it's 8-4-0. You're not going to get, I'll just play it out anyway. No submission onto Bastien there. After putting him in a full Nelson, top wrist lock by Wagner, but he's unable to do so and he has to back off. So 3.5 minutes gone by and about. Illegal punches by Dr. Wagner Jr. And so far the stamina damage is 10 for Wagner, minus 10 to 24 to Bastien. As I've mentioned before, you can actually gain stamina points, but that's kind of a rare event in this game. Action happening in Defend the Title. That means a special event has occurred. Bastien has had enough of the stall tactics and tears into Dr. Wagner Jr. Opponent puts together a string of moves that has Jr. reeling. Red Bastien is completely dominating at this point and reduce Wagner's Jr.'s stamina by 40. Bastien counters a Wagner move. Illegal forearm by Bastien, and Bastien off to a good start so far. 5 minutes 31 seconds gone by. Collar and elbow hookup results in neither wrestler gaining the advantage. Legal throw by Dr. Wagner Jr. Pin attempt, very small odds of getting him. Not there, no pin. Auto control loss. Bastien more paying attention to the referee, making sure he's neutral. Legal elbow by Dr. Wagner Jr. And Bastien's damage now catching up to the champions. Disqualified check, possible DQ stopped. Legal turnbuckle move by Bastien, but all's fair in love and war, I guess. Legal speed move by Bastien. Bastien, oh, he's caught in a body slam. Very small odds of a successful pin. No pin, let's move on. Kick that is barely above the belt. The referee and the crowd all look suspiciously at Wagner, but they will allow it, and Bastien loses another 5 points. Rear chinlock by Wagner Jr., 4 points. And we have cuts. We have a collision. Both go down. Each wrestler may be cut. It's just small cuts. Wagner Jr. with a cut on his nose. You can see the blood coming out of his mask a little bit, and Bastien has a little bit of a tore lip. Legal knee by Bastien. Submission move by Wagner, an Indian deathlock, but that does not result in a submission check. So we go on legal punches by Bastien, and it is still almost dead even at this point. 12-11 now gone by in the match. Legal arm hold by Bastien. Pin hold, a pin attempt onto Dr. Wagner Jr., and there it is! Small package. Red Bastien is the new junior heavyweight champion of the world. He does it in 13 minutes and 20 seconds. And there's now claims from Dr. Wagner Jr. that trunks were pulled. He's pushing around the referee, but the referee stands by his decision, and we have a new junior heavyweight champion, and he is Red Bastien. See if anything happened after the match. Nope. And in 13 minutes and 20 seconds, Dr. Wagner Jr., his first defense, he's done. He's won, and he's done. And that's how that's going to end. Now, next week, we're going to have another world title defense. We have that scheduled for the South Circuit. And so we could see a big name challenging Farmer Burns, who we now know will be facing John Piesick at Okerlund Cup 2 on week 39. And we're looking forward to that in a few weeks. So our next Grand Slam Wrestling match of the week will be a week from tomorrow, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, and that will be August 1st. So look for it then. This has been Big Paulie coming to you. We wish you well wherever you are, whenever you see this. Godspeed and God bless, and good night, everybody.